Hi, this is Mercedes Franks from the Nacogdoches Public Library. Welcome to this week's edition of the Citizenship Study Group. This week we're going to look at the vocabulary for the N400, so we'll get started in just a moment. As we mentioned, the N400 is the application that you submit once you're ready to start the citizenship process. When we had one of our speakers earlier this year, Rosa Ramirez from the USCIS, she recommended that if you are not quite ready to actually be interviewed or to take your exam, to go ahead and wait before you submit your N400. Once you submit your N400, the clock basically starts ticking, and there will be some time for processing of the application, but really you can be called at any time for your interview and for your exam. So you want to make sure that you are ready to actually go through the interview before submitting your exam. Typically takes about 6 months to maybe even a year for you to be called in for your interview. But as she mentioned, that's not certain. Some people have been called earlier, and so you don't want to get caught by surprise. So if you haven't prepared, you don't feel quite ready, go ahead and hold off on submitting your N400. If you've already turned it in, that's okay. Just means that you need to make sure that you are spending your time studying for the exam so that when you do get called, you are ready. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at the vocabulary that is on the N400. I'm going to give you an opportunity to listen to the vocabulary, practice saying it a few times, and then we'll repeat the words together. We also want to work on our spelling. We'll do that as best we can with this remote video that we're doing, but we'll go over the vocabulary, and then we'll review some more of the questions from the civics portion of the exam. We'll conclude with that. Okay, so in just a moment, we're going to get started. Ok, esta semana lo que vamos a hacer es practicar el vocabulario de la forma N400, el N400. Si se acuerda de otros días, esta forma N400 es la aplicación que usted entrega cuando está listo para tomar su examen y para ir a la entrevista. La señora Rosa Ramírez, que una vez o varias veces ha venido a la biblioteca para darnos consejos de cómo hacer la aplicación y consejos de la entrevista, nos aconsejó que que uno debe que esperar hasta que uno está listo, ya estudió, ya está preparado para tomar el examen y hacer la entrevista antes de entregar la forma. Y dijo porque muchas veces se toma 6 meses a 1 año para cuando te llaman para la entrevista, pero uno debe que estar listo cuando usted entrega la forma porque no sabe cuándo es que le van a llamar. A veces se toma 6 meses, como dijimos, a veces que 1 año, pero han habido casos cuando le hablan más pronto. Entonces no quiere entregar esa forma hasta que usted esté listo para tomar el examen. Si usted ya entregó la forma N400, es ok, no se preocupe, pero sí es importante que ya cuando la entregaste, que comience usted estudiando y preparando. No pierda tiempo. Has de poner que te van a llamar pronto, entonces ya de una vez comience usted a estudiar. Y acuérdese que tenemos aquí en la biblioteca materiales para estudiar para el examen y son gratis para prestar. Solamente necesita una tarjeta de la biblioteca. Si no tiene una tarjeta, nomás nos llama. Somos varias aquí que hablamos español y nosotros le podemos ayudar. Entonces no tengan pena. Nos hablan o vienen a la biblioteca y nosotros les podemos ayudar con esos materiales para estudiar para el examen. ¿Ok? Entonces vamos a comenzar. Si ustedes tienen computadora, ya de una vez vaya usted a la página web del uscis.gov. para seguir y encuentre la forma N400 y de ahí vamos a comenzar. Si es que no tiene computadora o no tiene tiempo ahorita para ir a buscar esa página web, no se preocupe. Nosotros vamos a hacer el vocabulario con una página que tengo yo aquí. Pero acuérdese que cualquier vez que usted tiene una pregunta, me puede llamar y yo hago lo mejor que puedo para contestarle su pregunta. ¿Ok? So vamos a comenzar el vocabulario y el deletreo de las palabras y las frases de la N400. Ok, ahorita vamos a comenzar. We're going to study the vocabulary from the N400. The N400 application are basically questions that have to do with you. So it'll be basic questions about your name, your birth date, and then they'll ask you other questions about where you were born, your nationality, address, etc. So you want to make sure that you study thoroughly the N400, not only that you understand what the questions are, because part of the interview process will be to make sure that you actually understand what you wrote in your application, but also that if there were any changes, maybe you had a change between the time that you applied and the present, that you are able to explain that basically so that you can demonstrate that you understand what the questions are. So the words and phrases from the N400. These words are about marital status and spouses are on your N400 application. Practice saying and spelling these words. Talk about what they mean. And so that's what we're going to do. As we say each word or phrase, I will pronounce it, give you an opportunity to pronounce it, and then I'll flash the phrase or word on the screen so that you can see if you spelled it correctly. And then we'll talk about what does it mean. Okay, so we're going to get started in just a moment. Okay, the first phrase that we're going to practice is your full name. So the person's going to interviewing you is going to ask you, what is your full name? Please state your full name. So make sure you understand that that's your first name and your middle name. If you happen to have a hyphenated or a second last name, be sure to include that. Make sure that your name matches all your documentation so that you can answer that question correctly. So please practice saying the phrase full name, and then make sure that you have practiced spelling it. And here is the spelling so you can check that against what you have written. So there you go. That is the correct spelling of full name. Okay. All right, so your next question from your N400 is going to be your first name. So be sure to practice pronouncing that first name. And as Rosa Ramirez from the USCIS told us, don't worry about getting your pronunciation perfectly. If you have an accent or maybe some other concern, don't worry. They're not grading you on whether or not you have perfect pronunciation, if you still have an accent or not. They just want to make sure that you can understand when you're being spoken to and that you are able to reply. So do not worry about that. They're very understanding, but you do want to practice as much as possible. So the next phrase is first name. So be sure to practice pronouncing that and then also spelling that. So I have that on the screen here. Okay. So here is your first name. So in this case, mine would be Mercedes. So we're going to take a little break while you write those down. Okay, we just finished the phrase first name. The next phrase that we're going to go through is your middle name. Oops, I'm sorry, I put that up a little bit sooner. Okay, so your middle name, this is usually, some people have a second first name, and so they, in the United States, we commonly call it our middle name. Not everybody has one, so if you don't have one, just be sure to let them know that you don't have one. So in my case, my middle name is Montero or Montero. And so that's how I would reply that that's my middle name. Okay. Be sure to be able to pronounce that middle name and be sure to be able to spell that. Okay. So the next question that you will be asked on your form is your last name, your last name. So this is also known as your family name or your surname, or if you speak Spanish, your apellido. So whatever you use as your last name, that is what you will answer. So for me, mine will be Franks. And so be sure to be able to pronounce that last name and be sure to be able to spell that. Okay? So we'll take a little break for you to jot that down and we'll continue with our list. Okay, next we're going to move on to questions related to your family life. And so the next question or the next vocabulary word is spouse. So spouse. So be able to pronounce that, spouse. And here is the spelling of the word spouse. Okay. So your spouse is your married partner. This can be your husband or wife. So that's spouse. So the person that you are married to. So you will be asked, are you married? And so you would answer yes or no, and then they would ask you some questions about your spouse. Okay. All right. The next vocabulary word is husband. Okay. So if you speak Spanish, this question relates to esposo. Okay. So they might ask you the name of your husband. So be able to pronounce that as well as spell that. Okay. And then the next vocabulary word is wife. So if you speak Spanish, that's going to be esposa. Okay. Esposa. But if you're answering in English, obviously it's going to be wife. Okay. So be sure to pronounce that wife and be sure to be able to spell that. Okay. All right, so we're going to take a little break and we'll answer a few more questions. Okay, so the questions about whether you have a wife or a husband, questions about spouse have to do with your marital status. So they're going to ask you, what is your marital status? Or they might ask you, are you married? And so basically that means, do you have a husband or a wife? And so marital status is your next vocabulary word. So basically what they want to know, if you're married or if you're single or if you're divorced or if you're separated. So that's what they mean when they ask you, what is your marital status? Or tell us about your marital status. So be sure to be able to pronounce marital status as well as being able to spell that. Okay? So again, that has to do whether or not you are married, single, divorced, separated, or widowed. We forgot to mention widowed. All right, so married. Okay. Eres casado? Okay. So basically, are you married? Do you have a spouse or do you have a wife or a husband? Are you married? Okay. Single. So if you're not currently married, whether you're divorced or separated or widowed, you are single. You don't currently have a spouse, so you would answer single. Entonces, si usted está divorciado, separado o es usted viuda o viudo, usted contestará que eres single. So eso quiere decir que eres soltera o soltero. So single. Entonces, vamos a seguir las palabras. Okay, so again, reviewing, single means that you're not currently married. Okay, so let's continue with our vocabulary. We just finished off with the word single, and we said that that was when you are not married currently. Our next vocabulary word is divorced. So if you had previously been married and you got a divorce, you are divorced. And you don't have to worry, they're not, this is not going to count against you, but they do want to know if you are divorced. If you are divorced or if you're married, be sure to take that paperwork with you showing that you're either your marriage certificate or your divorce certificate. Be sure to go prepared with any documentation that applies to you that includes your divorce decree. So that is the word divorced. Okay. Si usted está divorciado, no se preocupe, eso no cuenta contra usted, pero es necesario que usted lleve sus documentos para que para probar que está divorciada. O si está casado, llévase su certificado de matrimonio. Okay. So our next word is going to be widowed. So widowed means that your spouse is no longer living, they are deceased. So you are considered widowed when your spouse is deceased. En español, esto quiere decir que usted es viudo o viuda, que su esposo o esposa ha fallecido, entonces usted se considera widowed. En inglés la palabra para eso es widowed. Entonces practique diciendo la palabra y escribiendo la palabra para que lo pueda hacer bien. Okay? So that was the word widowed, and this is when your spouse is no longer living. Okay. Next is your date of birth. So the date on which you were born. So again, reminding you to make sure you take all your documents with you, your birth certificate, any other documents, your baptismal records, anything like that that can help show that you have your documentation in order. So this is your date of birth, the day on which you were born. Okay, so include the day, the month, and the year. Okay, so date of birth en español, si es que habla usted español, es la fecha en que nació usted, incluyendo el mes, el día y el año en que usted nació. Okay, so that is your date of birth, la fecha de nacimiento. Okay. Next, you will probably be asked your place of birth. So where were you born? So be sure to be able to pronounce that. Place of birth. Place of birth. So be able to tell where you were born. Okay, en español, el place of birth quiere decir dónde nació usted, el lugar en donde usted nació, la ciudad, el país en donde usted nació. Okay, so that is your place of birth. Okay. You will also be asked about your nationality. So your country. También te van a preguntar el país en que usted pertenece. So your nationality. Okay, so be able to pronounce that as well as spell that. Okay, your nationality. Okay. All right, we're going to take a little break right here and then we'll continue with some more vocabulary words. Okay, our last question before we went on break was nationality. Again, this is the country to which you currently belong. Again, this might not necessarily be the country where you were born, but the country which you currently belong. So if you were from Germany and that's your nationality, then you are German. So what is your nationality? So somebody from Italy would probably answer Italian. So what is your nationality? Next, country. So they'll probably ask you, in which country were you born? And so here's the correct spelling of country. Entonces, este es el país en donde usted nació. Y regresando a la palabra nationality, disculpe que se me olvidó decirlo en español. Esto es como si usted se considera. Entonces, si, por ejemplo, es de Alemania, usted dirá soy alemano. Disculpe, no sé. O si uno es de de México, pues dirá yo soy mexicano o mexicana. Entonces, eso quiere decir nationality. Country, ya dijimos, es país. So country, again, going back to English, is your country. Okay. All right, your address. So you will be asked your address. Make sure that you know where the address that you put on your application. It is best to contact USCIS if you will be having a change of address so that you can update that on your records. If you do have a change of address, make sure that you have proper documentation so that you can correctly answer those questions. But it's best to contact USCIS before you go to your interview so that you can know what document you might need and whether or not maybe you should wait before moving. But be sure to have that information correct. Okay. So su dirección en donde la aplicación del N400 en donde vive usted. Si tiene un cambio de dirección, es importante que usted se comunique con el USCIS para saber qué documentos usted necesita para mostrar la dirección nueva, o a lo mejor te aconsejarán que se espere un poco, pero es importante comunicarse con la oficina de USCIS si es que tiene un cambio en dirección. Okay, so if you have a change in address or you have any questions about that, be sure to contact USCIS. But address refers to the physical location where you live. Okay. Those are all the questions on the list of vocabulary words. So now we're going to go to the section about marital status. So I'm going to read off the instructions and we are going to go through these. I will pause at each of these to make sure that you understand what we're saying. So this next section will have to do with your marital status. Again, whether you are married, single, divorced, or widowed. Okay. Entonces, la sección que vamos a seguir es del matrimonio. Si usted es casado, soltero, divorciado o viudo. Entonces, ese es el vocabulario que vamos a practicar en lo que sigue. Okay, at the interview, you will be asked about your marital status. So as it says here, your application has questions about your marital status and your spouse. Marital status means, are you married or single? So we're going to go over these questions and the possible responses for these. So the first question is, are you married? So you would just simply answer with a yes or a no. So are you married? Next question is, are you single? Again, you just answer with a yes or a no. Are you divorced? So again, just a yes or a no. Are you widowed? So has your spouse passed away? Has your spouse died? So again, a yes or a no. So the question would be, what's your marital status? And you would just simply answer, I am, and then fill in the blank, whether you're married, single, divorced, or widowed. Okay, so those basic questions, it's just a basic question of what is your marital status? And again, whether you're married, single, divorced, or widowed. Las siguientes frases que vamos a practicar, el vocabulario que vamos a practicar, tienen que ver con el marital status, o también se conoce por el civil, por el estado civil, disculpe. Entonces aquí lo que quieren saber es si eres casado, divorciado o si eres viudo o viuda. Entonces es lo que vamos a contestar. Entonces la primera pregunta será, are you married? Que si eres casado. Entonces usted nomás contesta sí o no. Are you married? También te pueden preguntar, are you single? Are you single? Que si es usted divorciado, casado o viudo. O si es soltero. Disculpe. Si es soltero. Are you divorced? Are you divorced? Que si usted está divorciado. Are you widowed? Are you widowed? Que si usted es viudo o viuda. So te van a preguntar, what's your marital status? ¿Qué es su estado civil? Y usted va a contestar con la respuesta que le pertenece a usted. I am married, or I am single, I am divorced, or I am widowed. So una de esas respuestas es lo que va a decir usted. I am married, I am single, I am divorced, or I am widowed. Okay? So ahorita vamos a seguir con la siguiente parte que tiene que ver con el esposo o esposa. Okay, the next section will have to do with your spouse, if you have a spouse. Okay, so the section here says your spouse. Your application has questions about your spouse. On your application form, you will read the word spouse. In the interview, you will say the words husband or wife. So spouse has two meanings. That could be the husband or the wife. So that will be what we will practice in just a few moments. Okay? All right. So in your application, you have written your spouse's name, and again, whether it's your husband or your wife. And so the next questions will be taken from your N400, and they will ask you these questions. If you're single, you just leave that section blank. Okay? So you will be asked, what's your wife's name? What is your wife's name? And so you will answer, her name is. Okay? So your wife, you will say what her name is. Okay? You will be asked about your wife. Is she a U.S. citizen? And so you will answer, yes, she is, or no, she is not. And then you will be asked about your wife's address. What's her address? And so you would provide that answer. She lives at. So if it's the same as yours, you would just repeat your address. If it's different, then you give whatever her address is. Okay? So again, what's your wife's name? And you would respond, her name is. Is she a U.S. citizen? Yes, she is, or no, she is not. What's her address? She lives at. Okay, so those are going to be questions about your wife. If you have a husband, it'll be similar, except that the word in English for the male spouse is husband. So it'll be, what's your husband's name? And you would answer, his name is. So again, they're going to ask you, is he a U.S. citizen? Yes, he is, or no, he is not. What's his address? He lives at. So again, if you have a husband, you will be asked, what is your husband's name? So his name is. Is he a U.S. citizen? So yes, he is, or no, he is not. And then what is his address? And you would provide that address. He lives at, and give the address. Okay? So now we're going to go over this in Spanish for our Spanish speakers, and then we will continue in English. Ok, ahora te van a preguntar preguntas sobre su esposo o esposa, su marido o marida. Entonces, aquí dice, your application has questions about your spouse. Otra vez, spouse en inglés es el nombre del marido o la marida. Y en inglés, husband quiere decir esposo y wife quiere decir esposa. Entonces te van a preguntar, si usted tiene esposa, te van a preguntar, what's your wife's name? ¿Qué es el nombre de la esposa? Te van a preguntar, is she a US citizen? Que si ella es ciudadana. Y usted contesta, yes, she is, que sí es, o no, she is not, que no es. También te van a preguntar, what's her address? What is her address? ¿En dónde vive la esposa? So usted va a contestar, she lives at, y usted va a dar la dirección en donde vive la esposa, o la señora, como dice mi mamá. ¿Ok? Si usted tiene esposo, so if you have a husband, te van a preguntar, what's your husband's name? Y usted va a contestar, la pregunta es, ¿qué es el nombre del esposo? Y usted dice, his name is, so el nombre de mi esposo es. También te van a preguntar, is he a US citizen? Que si el esposo es ciudadano, y usted va a contestar, yes, he is, que es ciudadano, o si no es, va a decir, no, he is not, que no es ciudadano. Te van a preguntar, what's his address? Que la dirección del esposo. Y usted va a decir, he lives at, y luego usted da la dirección del esposo. ¿Okay? Entonces, esto concluye nuestra parte de estudio por hoy. Ya casi llegamos al tiempo. Y vamos a comenzar la semana que viene. Vamos a seguir con esta aplicación de N400. Pero les quiero recordar que el grupo de ESL se reúne cada miércoles a las 6 de la tarde afuera del edificio para mantener la distancia social y si es necesario utilizar una máscara para proteger a todos. Pero hoy concluye nuestro programa para hoy y espero verlos la semana que viene. We have reached the end of our lesson for today. We went over the questions on the N400 and we will continue that next week. We want to make sure that we've got the N400 ready, and so as you can, practice your vocabulary, your spelling, and your pronunciation. Some quick reminders, we have the weekly ESL book club and story time every Wednesday at 6 o'clock. So this is a great time to come and practice your pronunciation and your speaking skills. If depending on what we get as far as participation, we will have either just conversation, so this is a great time to just practice your speaking skills, or we will do story time. So if you have kids, bring them along and we'll do some story times together. So this is every Wednesday at 6 o'clock. Masks are required, so be sure to bring your mask. Depending on how many people we get, we'll either be outside or we'll be inside the lobby. So that's Wednesdays at 6 o'clock. And then just another reminder that we still have the 2020 census. We want to encourage everyone in Nacogdoches to complete their census. Remember, you do not have to be a citizen to complete the census. The citizen is for anybody that lives in the United States. And so be sure to complete your census. You should have received that several months ago in the mail, a postcard. You can complete it by mail. You can do it on a computer or you can call in. The library offers free Wi-Fi, so if you need to complete your census but you don't have Wi-Fi at home, just come to the library and you can complete your census. We won't help you do the census. We don't actually complete the census for you, but we'll help you get onto the correct website so that you can answer your census. So be sure to do that. And so we will meet next Thursday at 5:30 p.m. on Facebook. And be sure to make a comment so that we know that you're participating. And if you want to see different content on this class, please let us know. This class is for you, so if you have any preferences, let me know and I will do my best to accommodate you. So until next time, have a wonderful week. Thank you.